the direction the data moves, and I'll let you read it, but I'd rather just summarize it. Religion used to be, and to many people it still is, the very definition of religion has to do with faith and belief. And the central feature of people's religion was, what do you believe in? What are the doctrines and dogmas that you adhere to? And that usually was whatever you were raised to believe, whatever your church or tradition told you. That started to change largely, well, over time. Even Emerson had rejected certain things, but over time, but massively, it started to change after World War II and with the emergence of my generation coming of age, because we were this generation that didn't want to believe what we were told just because we were told to believe it. We insisted on thinking for ourselves, and question authority became a bumper sticker in American life. But we especially didn't want to believe in things that didn't seem to hold up to reason or logic or the facts of history or the facts of science. And a lot of Western religion required that. And we said, no thanks, we'll take our chances. And we decided to look elsewhere in massive numbers. There were always free thinkers in America, who rejected religious dogma. But what changed was, it used to be if you rejected religious dogma or the institutions of religious life, the churches, synagogues, the houses of worship, if you rejected that and didn't want to participate, you were pretty much on your own spiritually. There was nothing, if you had a spiritual inclination. So that if you were either religious or you just were secular and atheist. When the gurus came and the books from the Vedic tradition came, we saw, oh wait, you can have a serious, authentic spiritual life without having to buy into religious dogma that you don't believe in. This was one of the key messages. And this was a breath of fresh air to many of us. And now American religion has become predominantly experience-centered in the spirit of yoga, as opposed to belief-centered. And the freedom of inquiry and an ability to question dogma has become predominant. And people's religious identity is less tied up in, well, I belong to this tribe and that institution, and more to, I'm on a spiritual search and I'm going to find truth and value wherever I can. It's become more personal in the spirit of there being many yogas and different yogas for different people, and different sampradayas might be appropriate for this person and that person. The nature of how people perceive the nature of the divine, or of God, if you want to use that word, has also changed. America had this, the Western world, Western religion had this, ability, this strong dividing line between us as humans and God out there, who was looking on us and making decisions about us, and who might give us what we want and save us if we behave a certain way. But there was a dualistic perspective. And part of that dualistic perspective was that we humans were sinners, and if we're lucky, we'll be saved and spared. That all shifted. Now, if you ask people about God, the predominant view is not the male deity sitting and watching us, but something more like Brahman. They may not use that word. They may say energy, intelligence, all, whatever it is, spirit. But what they're describing is what the Vedic texts would describe as Brahman. And if you ask them about the nature of the deepest nature of the self and the true nature of the self, the ultimate nature of the self, what they'll describe sounds like Atman. There's millions and millions of Americans who understand that and know the language and have studied yoga and have studied Vedanta, and they speak the language of the yogic texts. But there's many more people who have never heard Tattvam Asi. Maybe never even heard the English translation of Tattvam Asi. Maybe they have never heard Sat Chit Ananda. But somewhere along the line, someone whispered to them, your deepest nature is bliss. You are infinite, you are divine. And in language they understood, and that was a welcome message. And it's not just welcome because it's more positive, it's welcome because it fits the intuition of what we already kind of know and feel and sense, and there it is laid out for us in the Vedic texts and in the words of the gurus who have come to America. These shifts, and there's one more. As I kind of indicated, it used to be that Americans, the predominant attitude, not by everybody, there were always liberal Christians and open-minded Christians, and of course Jews never felt their way is the only way. But it was this predominant sense that Christianity was the supreme expression and development in the history of religion, and Jesus is the one true Savior, and everybody else is lost if they don't buy into it. People have rejected that wholesale, and now if you ask people, and this is the poll the Newsweek editor was responding to, if you ask them about their attitudes toward people of other traditions and other faiths, it's a much more pluralistic and accepting and harmonious view than ever existed before. And if you ask them, can people of other traditions achieve spiritual fulfillment or salvation or whatever language they use, more than 70% say yes. This is unprecedented. And that's what she meant by we're coming more and more like Hindus. Ekam sat vipraha vahuda vadanti might as well be a recipe on a menu, a menu item in an Indian restaurant to most people. They don't know what it means, but they know the English. They have heard truth is one, the wise call it by many names, or sometimes it's shortened to one truth, many paths, and this has filtered into people's lives and they like it. And the irony is, it's much more American than the other way, because America's this pluralistic country who believes in freedom of thought and freedom of expression and equality, and yet our predominant religions were not reflecting that. But the absorption of Vedanta and yoga has shifted that to a large degree. That's my argument for that, and the data back it up. Now, you could say, oh, well, it's just certain intellectuals and bohemians and old hippies like Phil Goldberg and, that sort of thing. But it's not. These ideas have filtered it really into the mainstream. And I'm going to show you a video that is my favorite evidence of that. And we hope the sound works. Next one.
Namaste. And you write this down because this is something we're going to be using every Sunday from now on. Men, I need you to get it. Ladies, I want you to get it, but especially I want my men and boys to get it. N-A-M-A-S-T-E. That's a Hindu term. Namaste. Say that. Namaste. Say it again. Namaste. Jerome means the divinity within me salutes the divinity within you. Y'all missed it. Namaste means the divinity within me salutes the divinity within you. Now, flag, this simply means I recognize that Bobby has some God in him. See, many of our boys don't have any respect for life. That's why it's so easy to kill them. So when I realize that Bobby got some God in him, just as I have some God in me, that will make me respect him not only physically, but I'll respect what I say about Bobby. We have not been taught to respect one another, so I need you to say it again. Namaste. Say it again. Namaste. The divinity within me salutes the divinity. Any teaching going on here today? And maybe that's why we have been mistreating one another for much too long. I want us to start today to say that word over and over. I want men and women, young and old, to start greeting one another instead of saying, what's happening? Young folk, when you greet somebody, namaste. Say it, why? Namaste. Say it again. Namaste. What does that mean? The divinity within me salute. So don't tell me, what's happening, bro? Because that ain't kept our boys from killing one another. They've been saying it for a long time. What's happening, bro? Bam!
Like that? That, in case you want to look it up, that's Reverend Eddie Smith. Now, most people in America know the context of this, but in case you don't, he is the pastor of a very traditional African-American Christian church in the deep south of America, in the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia is not what it used to be. There are mandirs in Atlanta, and I've spoken at temples there. But this is not Atlanta. This is a smaller town in the most conservative Christian part of the country, the Deep South. He was not just teaching them a new word. He was changing the way they understand who they are and who we are and what God is. They're not used to that message there, but that's the kind of thing that goes on. And you could see in his passion that he thought maybe there's some deep implications just in that one word, that one concept, because he's in a part of the world where there was terrible violence, and there may be some hope in that. So, with that, I want to just quickly give you a sense of the many ways that the Sanatana Dharma has come into America, and the most prominent is the prominent gurus and swamis and yogacharyas and others who came from India to us, beginning with Swamiji. You all know about his triumph in Chicago in 1893, but from an American point of view, if that's all he did, if he had come to Chicago and given a few speeches and gone home, we wouldn't even be talking about it. He stayed for a few years, and among other things, and he left a lasting legacy in America in the form of books. He was the first to articulate the four principal paths of yoga in real good English, and those books are still reading. People read the transcriptions of his speeches. But he also left behind teaching institutions. Here it's the Ramakrishna Mutts. We have the Vedanta Society. And that chain of centers in most major cities over time, the swamis from Dakshineswar would come and run those centers. They were the voices of Hindu Dharma in America for a number of years before other gurus started to come. And they, in turn, influenced some of the most important Americans, who in turn would propagate Vedanta to the rest of the country. I'll get back to them in a minute. In 1920, Paramahansa Yogananda came to America with his Kriya Yoga lineage and decided to stay there, and lived the rest of his life, except for one trip to India, in America, in Los Angeles, where I now live, and established centers all over the country that still exist, still flourish. And his memoir, Autobiography of a Yogi, is probably the most important book in this whole transmission, single book, because it's been read by millions and millions of Americans. I still have the copy I read in 1970. And I'm actually I can't say rereading it because I have it on audio on my iPhone as I travel around India. A hugely important work. And then there was an explosion of interest in India and India's spiritual legacy in the late 1960s and into the 1970s. And a dozen or more gurus who had come, some of whom had already been there and suddenly became famous, became popular. And many of them, they had large numbers of followers. I just, because I don't have time, in my book I describe each of them and what they brought and who they were and what they, who the different kind of people they attracted. But these were the main ones, and I always have to qualify this by saying, if I left out your favorite guru, I apologize, but there was no